So the NBA draft, which is in about a month, I would say. Um, Actually, depending when this video comes out, a month or 29 days till the draft. Um, but yeah, that's the next thing on the NBA schedule. Besides coaches getting hired. So yeah, I'm gonna do a mock draft of this year's NBA draft. Now, after Anthony Edwards, there's no consensus on who really goes next in this draft. I've seen a lot of mock drafts with very differing results. I'm gonna combine that with watching highlights and scouting videos of these players and what was ever the college basketball season, the 3 or 4 months that it was. Um, or I guess it got through the regular season and just didn't get through tourney play or tournament play. But yeah, let's get into it. Timberwolves have the number one pick. They just acquired D'Angelo Russell or they didn't just acquire him, they acquired him at the trade deadline, and they're going to try and surround pieces around D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns. So, I'm going to have the Timberwolves select Anthony Edwards out of Georgia. I think he's the perfect piece to complement D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, especially D'Angelo's poor defense. I do think Edwards, besides sometimes the effort not being there, his defense is really good. And I also think he doesn't need the ball. He doesn't need the ball to be involved on offense, which is huge, because D'Angelo, he's a ball dominant point guard. So yeah, they're gonna select Anthony Edwards because of his potential and also because of his fit with the Timberwolves stars. State Warriors are the number 2 pick in this draft, and because they're a championship contending team with Klay Thompson coming back from injury, from what is now 18 months probably when the season restarts, they don't really need not a superstar, but they don't really need a rebuild per se, and they don't really need to burn down their team from scratch. So they just kind of need to build on it, and the problem with that is that you would then assume, okay, hey, let's trade the pick, right? So who do you trade it to? There was one trade offer that I was kind of getting close with was Detroit, where they would swap picks. But what I found was challenging was that the Warriors would only get a second round pick. So why is it worth it for the Warriors to go down 5 slots and possibly lose out on Devin Vassell, who they are selecting at the number 2 spot in my mock draft this year, gain a second round pick? And I just think the risk of losing out on Vassell worth a second round pick. Now I'm going to go into how Devin Vassell can help this Warriors team. Get into his defensive potential. His 3-point potential is pretty good. In college, he shot about 490% from 3. Again, that's with the college 3-point line is like a 2 feet closer to the basket than in the NBA. But that's still pretty good. I kind of expected him to be a really good shooter in this league. On defense, there's like no holes on his defensive skills. Obviously, there's room to improve for everything. But, when he has to switch, when just guarding an on-ball defender, I think it's really good. I guess the one thing with him is that he's not able to create his own shot, but I don't really think he needs to worry about that on the Warriors because you got Stephen Curry and you got Klay Thompson. They're creating their own shots. He doesn't have to sit in the corner all day, but he doesn't have to, be a superstar on this team, and I think it's a really good fit, even though it's maybe a little bit too early to pick him at this spot. The Hornets have the 4th overall pick, and they need a young big man. They got P.J. Washington, and they got Miles Bridges, and they got Devontae Graham manning point guard duties. But they need a big man. And maybe some kind of old school fashion big man. They just don't have to have a person who could shoot from three really well. Just because PJ Washington's, I mean, a really good 3-point shooter, shooting 374% from three. So I mean, spacing is not an issue if you pick a traditional center or a center who can't shoot a three. So the player I'm going to choose is James Wiseman out of Memphis, or I guess out of Memphis for 3 games. I think he's a really, or he has potential as a really good pick and roll man, which seems to be part of Devontae Graham's game, and I think that could really unlock this Hornets offense. This Hornets offense was like 25th in offensive efficiency. It was like 25th in defensive efficiency too, because I mean, they weren't really this good this year. Not like a diss at the Hornets, they just weren't. But I mean, I think he's gonna be really good on the offensive end for them. Washington's a little bit undersized, just for rebounding purposes. So I think James Wiseman's gonna help with that. Defensive end, I think this pick can make them one of the more elite young defenses in the league, or a young elite defense or rising defense in the league, just because of Wiseman's ability to control the paint defensively. Yeah, I really do think this is a good pick for them, and I think it makes sense. My one concern though is that he's only played 3 games. Just because there really hasn't been, I mean, he's played in high school and he's probably going to get some workouts. There hasn't been that much data on him besides his high school games, and obviously AAU and all that stuff, but, you know, there's a little bit questions about, he doesn't really have the resume to back it all up, at least on the national scene. All right, let's get to the next pick. Chicago Bulls are up next with the 5th pick, and they need a wing, specifically an offensive wing. This team was, I think, 9th in defensive efficiency with 109.8. So, I mean, the defense isn't the problem in Chicago. It's more of the offense. And I think the player they're going to select is DJ Avavi, the player who plays for the Israeli league. I think he's going to help a lot with their offense. I think there is shooting. I think he's a lot of shooting potential. I think it's going to help. Also, I don't think the problem with this Chicago basketball team is their defense. They were 109. They had a 109.8 defensive rating, which is 9th best in the league. So I mean, the problem is the offense, and I think he's going to be able to create his own shot, which is going to be huge. And I feel like this is going to improve this team. The Cleveland Cavaliers are next. And for 2 straight drafts, they've drafted guards. They drafted Colin Sexton, and they drafted Darius Garland, respectively, in 2018 and 2019. So, I mean, they don't really need guards. Kevin Love is still there. I mean, he's not really like a 5, but he's more of a 4 type. But, I mean, I don't really think he's going to be... I mean, he probably will still be there because of his contract. But I do think you need to think about the future of this team. So that's why I'm going to have them select a big. And the best big man that is still available in the draft is Upa Toppin. Now, Upa Toppin, how do I think he's going to improve this Cavs team? I think his shooting is going to greatly impact him when Colin Sexton and Darius Garland are able to break down the defense. That's going to be huge. I also think he's going to be able to create some plays. I think his pick and roll is a little bit underrated. His pick and roll, a lot of scouts have him just, not as like something great, but I just think because people think he's so explosive, I just think that's going to be great for him when they're doing a pick and roll. And it's going to leave some great plays for them and some highlights. And on the defensive end, he kind of makes them worse. And that's not really a good fit with Kevin Love, who is a bad defender. But they do still need to think about the future of this team. And I don't really think they have to worry about fit that much, more as just get the best player available. The Atlanta Hawks are up next. They kind of need some scoring off the bench. They could also use another big man because you're not sure about the future of John Collins, and that fit with Clint Capella is going to be weird. I'm not sure if John Collins can hit the three sustainably for the spacing to work, but I do think that's a later concern. You see how that fit works between Clint Capella and John Collins. I think they never played a game together. Maybe it was a couple games, but I remember Clint Capella was out after the trade, I think due to some injury. But they do need some scoring off the bench, or ability to create scoring off the bench. That's why I'm going to go with LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball, why did he fall? Just because his shooting, there's some questions about his shooting, and I really think shooting in the NBA is important. And also, there are some questions about he doesn't sometimes know what he's doing with the ball. Well, that's not a nice way to put it, but I feel like all of this is true. I do think he has a chance to be an excellent passer, and I do think the Hawks long term could benefit from him kind of commanding their bench unit and maybe potentially becoming a starter. But I think him kind of commanding their bench unit and kind of leaving, becoming one of the better bench units in the league. And I think that's going to be huge for them because, there isn't really a need to find a starter for the Hawks, just because, you've got Trae Young, Kevin Huerter. He looks pretty good, and he looks like a nice compliment to Trae Young. DeAndre Hunter, it's a little bit of a mixed result, but you still want to give it another year. John Collins, he's pretty good. He is good, but I'm just concerned about that fit with Clint Capella. Someone's got to be able to space the floor. And the reason I didn't select a big was because there wasn't anyone in the top 15 that could really space the floor. So I picked LaMelo Ball just on his ability to create for them off the bench. Pistons are up next in this draft, and they need a point guard because they are going to trade Derrick Rose at some point because he's not going to re-sign there, and you could probably get a first round pick for him. Also, I don't think he's a long-term solution as a starting point guard. I think on a championships team he's a bench, like a 6th man or a 7th man, but I don't think he can be your starting point guard going forward. So I do think they need a point guard, and they're going to go with Killian Hayes here. Now, he seems to be one of the best, just overall talents in this draft. I guess the concern is that maybe he can't play point guard the whole time, or maybe he's best suited as a 2 guard, which, is not really a concern. The reasons might be at some point be a 2 guard instead of a 1 guard is just because the concerns about him handling the ball. There's been a lot of things about how he causes way too many turnovers. And he doesn't. He gets pretty good. He's pretty good at finding teammates to get open. But the assist to turnover ratio is not great. Also, the 3-point shooting is not great, which is a concern. There's not much defensive concern. I think that's one of his strengths, which is a great strength to have. But I do think the Pistons are going to select Killian Hayes with this pick. Knicks have the next pick, and they need a point guard. They do have Frank Ntilikina and Dennis Smith Jr., but neither of those players seem to be like the solution. You can go point RJ Barrett, but I think he's more suited at the 2, maybe the 3, and I think that's the best way you can get the most out of his talent. So they do need a point guard. So I'm gonna go with Tyrese Halliburton. The reason I love this pick is that it kind of allows you to have like a combo guard situation, or not a combo guard situation where you can kind of switch off between RJ and Tyrese Halliburton at the one position who's manning the ball. I think that's the best use of everyone's talents. if RJ isn't manning the ball all the time, I think that kind of loosens the stress a little bit. And also Tyrese Halliburton, when he doesn't have the ball, I mean, he's a really good shooter. He shot 409% from three. Again, that is with the college line being a little bit closer. So I mean, you expected that drop a little bit, or drop a lot, but I do think he's gonna be a really great or good 3-point shooter in this league. I also think he's able to basically kind of set up the offense when RJ isn't in the game, without doing like a Mitchell Robinson pick and roll, which I think is key. Kind of opens up the offense a little bit. His concerns, I think it would be some kind of action without like a designed play, and I think that is where RJ kind of comes in, to this equation. Maybe that help curb, or that does curb Halliburton's weakness. And I don't really think, let's say 5 years from now the Knicks are contending for a title, I don't think Halliburton's going to be shooting that last shot. I think it's going to be maybe RJ. I mean, if RJ is that good, I don't know if he is. He certainly showed flashes, but I don't think he's a superstar yet. Again, I'm kind of hyping. I'm a little bit of a Knicks fan, so I'm gonna show the bias a little bit, but I don't think isolation scoring is a concern with him, because you have RJ, who's, I think his main skill is scoring, and defense too. I think this is a perfect pick for the Knicks, and I hope this happens. Okay, I'm done with the Knicks bias. I'll get on to the next pick. They have the 9th pick in this draft, and they're pretty set with their guards, or at least they seem like they're going to stick with John Wall and Bradley Beal at the 1 and 2 respectfully, or starting 1 and 2 respectfully. Rui Hachimura, he seems to be really good. Maybe they need a wing, but I do think they need a big, because I don't think Thomas Bryant is the answer long term, with or without Bradley Beal. I do think that John will stay there long term, just because his recovery from injury will probably take a long time. So I have them taking Inaga from USC. My apologies, I didn't pronounce that name right, but yeah, it's a hard name to pronounce, which I don't really want to insult the name, but it's up there with Giannis Antetokounmpo with names that are hard to pronounce. But what do I think about this prospect? I think he's exactly kind of like, his NBA comparison would be Montrezl Harrell, and I think that kind of explains it perfectly. A person who gets a lot of rebounds, offensive, defensively. The concern would be that, he isn't that great of an outside shooter, but I do think Moritz Wagner will kind of improve in the next 2 years, and I think him and Moritz Wagner can kind of create a good 4 and 5, or starting 4 and 5, and that's really my pick with this one. Now let's get on to the next one. Now the Suns are up next, and even though they could use a big man that they could have for the long term, because I don't think Dario, he's a free agent this year, so I don't think he's there for the long term. I don't think his 3-point shooting is up to the standards you need with DeAndre Ayton, who isn't really a great 3-point shooter, or at least the games he's played so far. But even though all that is true, I think Isaiah O'Rourke, who's still left on the board at this point, I think you got to take him, just because the ways is going to help your second unit, so defensively. I think it's going to be a huge benefit. And, maybe he cracks up, he turns up to be cracks up into the starting lineup, and you're able to run Devin Booker at the 1, and then him at the 2, Isaiah O'Rourke at the 2, and Miles Bridges at the 3. And if that's like your kind of 2 guards for the future, Isaiah O'Rourke, who's an amazing defender, Devin Booker's one weakness is that he's not a superb defender. He isn't bad, but he isn't great. So I think Isaiah O'Rourke could potentially help him eventually. I guess once they get rid of Ricky Rubio, maybe they don't get rid of Ricky Rubio. Ricky Rubio isn't that bad of a starter this year. But I've heard on Twitter, all the Suns fans, complain of him. But I guess the reason he would slide to this point would just be offensively, he's not really that. I guess offensively, his offensive resume just doesn't look that good. There are concerns about his 3-point shooting, which is huge. So he's got to develop that. His ability to create his own shot is, I mean, a lot of scouts have said that he's kind of not good at that, and I kind of agree with that. It's something he's got to improve. And yeah, that's really it. I mean, his offensive game needs to be worked on, and I no doubt that he'll work on that. And he'll be a good player in this league. All right, now on to the final pick in this draft, or in this part one, the Spurs. Spurs, they're at a weird point. I mean, they don't know if DeMar DeRozan's gonna stay. They didn't make the playoffs this year for the first time in like 18 years, which is like the long. It was like it was like the longest NBA streak, playoff streak. But yeah, they're kind of at a weird point. They're not totally in a rebuild, but kind of. So I kind of went in between, and also just I think you're gonna see LaMarcus Aldridge in a Spurs uniform for at least a year, or at least half a year. But either way, I think Jalen Smith makes sense. He would make sense with LaMarcus Aldridge because of his 3-point shooting. But I think either way, he just fits with this team. I mean, he looks to be like a very good prospect. Obviously not like a top 5 prospect, but I think his 3-point shooting and his ability to be a good pick and roll setter, I think that's one of the key key things he's good at. He doesn't really seem to be that bad on defense. I mean, I guess you would say average, but he's not great. I guess his one thing is that he's not able to create for other players. He kind of needs to be like set up by like a point guard or something like that. So I do think that's something. I mean, they're gonna have to do that. DeJounte Murray's gonna have to set him up with a bunch of pick and rolls and all that stuff. If they want him to be successful in this league. And yeah. So that's really all I got in this video. I would do every team in one video, but that's kind of a very long video, and it's gonna take forever to download, so it's gonna be in parts. So we're at the 11th pick right now, or we just finished with the 11th pick. Now we're going on to the 12th pick. And that video is probably gonna come out, I would say, by the latest, the end of the weekend, but probably before that. So thanks for watching, and like and subscribe.